The stage rattled into Durango, Colorado on a blistering afternoon in July 1882, carrying nothing but dust, disappointment, and a woman who wished she could disappear into the floorboards beneath her worn boots. Naomi Rosewood pressed her forehead against the coach window, watching the rough-hewn buildings of the frontier town materialize through the grime. Her carpetbag sat at her feet, lighter than it should have been for a woman traveling toward marriage. Everything of value had been sold weeks ago, traded for passage west, and the faint hope that distance might erase what she had done. The other passengers, a silver miner and his wife, had stopped trying to make conversation with her somewhere around the Kansas border. Perhaps they sensed the shame that clung to her like the trail dust coating her threadbare traveling dress. The stage lurched to a stop outside the Wells Fargo office, and Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the window, she could see men gathered on the wooden sidewalk, their faces weathered and curious. One of them would be Preston Sawyer, the rancher who had answered her carefully worded advertisement with a simple letter that promised nothing but honesty and hard work. He had not asked for much in his correspondence. A woman who could cook, who did not mind solitude, who understood that life on a cattle ranch meant early mornings and late nights. He had included no photograph, only his age, 27, and a postscript that said he had built his house with his own hands, and it had room enough for a family someday. Naomi had written back with lies of omission, painting herself as a simple schoolteacher from Boston seeking adventure and a fresh start. She had not mentioned Philadelphia. She had not mentioned Marcus. She had certainly not mentioned the scandal that had driven her from her position at the girls' academy, the whispers that followed her down cobblestone streets, the way her own sister had shut the door in her face. The driver opened the coach door, and the summer heat rolled in like a physical thing. Naomi gathered her bag and stepped down onto the dusty street, her legs trembling after days of travel. The miner's wife gave her a pitying look as they departed, and Naomi wanted to call after her that pity was the last thing she needed. She had enough of her own. "Miss Rosewood." The voice came from her left, deep and uncertain. Naomi turned and found herself looking up at a man who seemed carved from the Colorado landscape itself. Preston Sawyer stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered beneath a work shirt that had seen better days, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Dark hair curled at his collar, and his eyes, a startling blue-gray, studied her with an intensity that made her want to confess everything right there in the street. "Mr. Sawyer." She forced herself to meet his gaze, to extend her hand like a lady ought to. "I hope the journey has not delayed me too much." His hand engulfed hers, calloused and warm. "You are right on time." He released her quickly, as though unsure of the proper etiquette. "I have the wagon just here. It is a 2-hour ride to the ranch, but I brought water and some provisions if you are hungry." "Thank you." The words came out smaller than she intended. Preston reached for her carpetbag, and Naomi's hand shot out reflexively. "Please, I can carry it." He paused, his expression unreadable beneath the hat's brim. "It is no trouble." But she held on, and after a moment he relented, leading her instead toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient horses. The bed was filled with supplies, flour and salt and coils of rope, the mundane necessities of ranch life. Preston helped her onto the bench seat with careful hands, then swung up beside her with the easy grace of a man accustomed to such movements. They rolled out of Durango in silence, the town falling away behind them as the landscape opened into vast stretches of scrubland punctuated by distant mountains. The San Juan Range rose purple and magnificent on the horizon, and despite everything, Naomi felt something in her chest loosen slightly. No one here knew her. No one here whispered her name with contempt. The ranch is called the Double S, Preston said after they had traveled a mile or so. My father started it in '68, ran cattle up from Texas. He passed 4 years ago, left it to me and my brother. My brother went to Denver last year, wanted to try his hand at business. So now it is just me and 2 hired men, Miguel and Joseph. They live in the bunkhouse on the property. Naomi nodded, unsure what to say. In his letters, Preston had mentioned the ranch but little of himself. She studied him from the corner of her eye, noting the strong line of his jaw, the way he held the reins with confident, easy hands. He was younger than she had imagined, though care and sun had etched lines around his eyes. I should tell you, he continued, his voice careful, that life out here is not what you are accustomed to in Boston. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles south. We do not get to town but once or twice a month, depending on the season. Winter can be hard. Spring brings mud and sometimes flooding from the snowmelt. Summer is hot, though the nights cool down pleasant enough. I understand, Naomi said softly. She wanted to tell him that isolation was exactly what she sought, that the idea of neighbors and society made her stomach clench with anxiety. But that would require explanation. Preston glanced at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps. She must look a fright after days of travel, her dark hair escaping its pins, her dress creased and dusty. In her advertisement, she had described herself as capable and educated. She had not mentioned that she was 24 years old and ruined, that her hands had never done a day's hard labor, that she knew more about Latin declensions than cooking over an open fire. I know this must be strange for you, Preston said quietly. Coming all this way to marry a man you have never met. I want you to know that I will not rush you into anything. We can have a proper courtship first, if that is what you want. The reverend in town can marry us when you are ready. The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. Naomi blinked hard against the sudden sting of tears. That is very generous of you. It is only right. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. You took a leap of faith coming here. The least I can do is make sure you are comfortable with the arrangement. They rode on through the afternoon, the sun beating down relentlessly. Preston pointed out landmarks as they went. A creek that ran reliable most of the year, the far-off smudge of smoke that marked his nearest neighbor's ranch, the trail that led up into the mountains where he sometimes hunted elk in the fall. His voice held a quiet pride when he spoke of the land, and Naomi found herself relaxing incrementally, lulled by the rhythm of the wagon and the vast openness around them. It was nearly sunset when they crested a low rise, and Preston pulled the horses to a stop. There, he said simply, gesturing ahead. The Double S spread out in the valley below, a collection of buildings clustered near a line of cottonwoods that marked a creek. The main house was larger than Naomi had expected, 2 stories of weathered wood with a wide porch wrapped around the front. A barn stood to the left, corrals stretching out beyond it where cattle grazed in the golden light. Smaller structures dotted the property, and smoke rose from the chimney of what must be the bunkhouse. It is beautiful, Naomi breathed and meant it. After the cramped, judging streets of Philadelphia, the space here felt like absolution. Preston's face softened. I am glad you think so. Come on, let us get you settled before dark. They descended into the valley as the sun touched the mountains, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. 2 men emerged from the barn as the wagon approached, both raising hands in greeting. Preston pulled up near the house and jumped down, finally taking Naomi's bag before helping her from the seat. Her legs wobbled after hours of sitting, and his hand steadied her elbow. Miguel Joseph, this is Miss Rosewood, Preston said as the men approached. She will be staying in the house. Miguel was older, perhaps 50, with silver threading through his dark hair and a weathered face that creased into a warm smile. "Welcome, Miss Rosewood. It is good to have a lady at the ranch again." Joseph was younger, barely 20, with a shock of red hair and an abundance of freckles. He ducked his head shyly. "Madam, if you need anything, you just holler." "Thank you both," Naomi said, grateful for their easy acceptance. Preston led her up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was clean but sparse, furnished with hand-built furniture and braided rag rugs on the plank floors. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and a kitchen area occupied the back. A staircase rose along the right wall. "I put fresh linens on the bed upstairs," Preston said, and Naomi heard the nervousness in his voice. "That will be your room. I have been sleeping down here on a cot, so you will have your privacy." Naomi turned to face him in the dimming light. "Mr. Sawyer, I do not want to put you out of your own bed. You are not putting me out of anything." His eyes met hers steadily. "Like I said, we can take our time with this. I want you to feel safe here." The lump in her throat threatened to choke her. She managed a nod, not trusting her voice. Preston showed her the rest of the house, the simple kitchen with its cast iron stove, the pantry stocked with staples, the washroom he had added 2 years prior with actual running water pumped from the creek. Upstairs, a hallway connected 3 bedrooms. He opened the door to the largest, and Naomi saw a wide bed covered in a colorful quilt, a dresser, a washstand with a porcelain basin. A window looked out over the valley, and in the fading light she could see the mountains etched against a deepening blue sky. "It is perfect," she whispered. Preston set her carpetbag on the floor. "I will let you rest. There is stew on the stove if you are hungry and water in the pitcher. Tomorrow I can show you around properly, introduce you to the routine." He hesitated in the doorway. "I am glad you are here, Miss Rosewood. I hope you will come to think of this as home." Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs, and Naomi was alone in the gathering dark. She sank onto the edge of the bed and let the tears come at last, silent sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for everything she had lost, for the foolish choices that had led her to this moment. She cried because Preston Sawyer seemed like a good man, and she was about to repay his kindness with deception. When the tears finally subsided, Naomi washed her face in the basin and unpacked her meager belongings. There was so little. 2 dresses besides the one she wore, both faded from repeated washing. A nightgown, undergarments, a hairbrush with half the bristles missing. A small leather-bound book of poetry that had been her mother's, the only thing of value she had kept. Everything else had been sold or left behind. At the bottom of the carpet-bag, wrapped in a handkerchief, was the letter. She had carried it across half the country, though she did not know why. Perhaps as evidence, perhaps as punishment. The paper was creased from repeated folding, the ink faded but still legible. Marcus's handwriting, once so beloved, now a source of bile in her throat. "My darling Naomi," it began. "By the time you read this, I will be married to Charlotte Pemberton. I am sure you understand the necessity. My family's financial situation requires certain sacrifices, and Charlotte's father has been most generous. What we shared was lovely, but surely you knew it could never be permanent. A man in my position must think of his future, his legacy. I trust you will be discreet about our friendship. Fondly, Marcus, friendship." As though she had not given him everything, as though he had not promised her the world in whispered words between stolen moments. As though she had not risked her reputation, her position, her entire future for the taste of his lies. The scandal had erupted when one of her students discovered them in the schoolroom after hours. Marcus's hands at Naomi's waist, his mouth on hers. The girl had told her parents, who told the school board, who told everyone. Marcus, already engaged to the wealthy Charlotte, had denied any impropriety beyond a friendly visit. Naomi had been dismissed immediately, her name dragged through Philadelphia society with gleeful cruelty. Her landlady had evicted her. Her sister Clara had refused to take her in, afraid the scandal would taint her own respectable marriage. Naomi had found work as a seamstress for 3 desperate weeks, sleeping in a boarding house that smelled of cabbage and despair. When the other women discovered who she was, the whispers started there too. One night, walking home in the dark, a man had followed her, calling her ugly names, assuming that a fallen woman was available to anyone. She had run, terrified, and made her decision that very night. West. She would go west where no one knew her, where she could start fresh. The mail-order bride advertisements had seemed like providence. She had crafted her letter carefully, emphasizing her education and skills while omitting the destruction she was fleeing. Preston Sawyer's response had arrived within 2 weeks, and she had used the last of her savings for stage fare. Now she was here, in this house built by honest hands, preparing to marry a man who believed she was something she was not. The weight of the deception sat heavy in her chest, but what choice did she have? Confess the truth and watch him send her away. She had nowhere else to go, no money for return passage, no family waiting with forgiveness. Naomi refolded the letter and tucked it back into the carpet bag. Tomorrow she would burn it. Tonight she would simply try to survive the shame that threatened to suffocate her. She changed into her nightgown and climbed between the sheets. They smelled of sunshine and soap, clean and fresh. Outside, coyotes yipped in the distance, an eerie sound that raised gooseflesh on her arms. She could hear Preston moving around downstairs, the scrape of the stove door, the creak of floorboards. Eventually those sounds ceased, and the house settled into silence. Naomi lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was making another terrible mistake. Morning came with rooster crows and the smell of coffee drifting up from below. Naomi dressed in her least worn dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been her second best, and braided her dark hair into submission. She descended the stairs carefully, uncertain of her welcome in the daylight. Preston stood at the stove, turning bacon in a cast iron skillet. He looked up when she entered and his face brightened. "Good morning. I hope the rooster did not startle you. He is enthusiastic about his job." "Good morning," Naomi replied, feeling awkward and out of place. "May I help with breakfast, if you like?" "There are eggs in the basket there and bread in the box." He gestured with the fork, then seemed to reconsider. "Or you can just sit if you prefer. You must still be tired from traveling." "I would rather help." Naomi moved to the counter, grateful for something to do with her hands. She found the eggs and a mixing bowl, cracked 6 into it, and looked around for a whisk. "Third drawer," Preston said, reading her hesitation. They worked in companionable silence, and Naomi was acutely aware of him beside her, the breadth of his shoulders, the way he moved with purpose and efficiency. He was nothing like Marcus, who had been slender and pale, given to quoting poetry and making grand gestures. Preston seemed solid, rooted in the earth, a man who spoke through action rather than words. They ate at the simple wooden table, and the food was better than anything Naomi had tasted in months. Real butter, bacon that was not mostly fat, eggs fresh from the henhouse. She tried not to eat too quickly to maintain some dignity, but Preston seemed to notice her hunger. "Please have more," he urged, pushing the platter toward her. "We have plenty and you are too thin." Heat crept into Naomi's cheeks, but she took another slice of bacon. "Thank you." "I confess, the journey was long and the food scarce." "Well, you will not go hungry here, that much I can promise." He studied her across the table, his expression thoughtful. "What did you do in Boston? You mentioned teaching in one of your letters. The lie came automatically, practiced during long stage rides. I taught at a small private school, literature and history mostly to younger children. Not entirely false. She had taught those subjects before everything fell apart. You must have been good at it to take a position like that. I enjoyed it, Naomi said carefully, but I wanted something different. The city felt confining. Preston nodded slowly. I can understand that. I went to Denver once, stayed 3 days, and could not wait to get back here. Too many people, too much noise. Give me cattle and open sky any day. After breakfast, he showed her around the ranch properly. The barn was enormous, filled with horses and the sweet smell of hay. Miguel was there, mending tack, and he greeted them with a smile. The chickens roamed freely in a large pen, fat and industrious. Preston explained the daily routines, how Miguel and Joseph handled most of the cattle work while he managed the finances and made decisions about breeding and selling. It was more complex than Naomi had imagined, a real business requiring knowledge and skill. Can you ride? Preston asked as they walked back toward the house. Naomi shook her head. I am afraid not. There was little call for it in the city. I can teach you if you like. It helps to know how out here, in case of emergency or if you just want to explore. He glanced at her, almost shy. There are some beautiful places in the mountains, wildflowers in the meadows, streams so clear you can see straight to the bottom. I would like that, Naomi said, and realized she meant it. Despite everything, despite the guilt gnawing at her conscience, she wanted to learn this new life. Wanted to become someone who could ride horses and recognize the call of different birds, who understood the rhythm of seasons and the satisfaction of hard work. The days developed a pattern. Naomi rose early and helped with breakfast, learning the temperamental stove and Preston's preferences. He liked his coffee strong and his bacon crispy, took 2 sugars in his morning cup. After the men departed for the day's work, she cleaned the house and attempted to bake bread, producing loaves that ranged from adequate to doorstop hard. Preston ate them without complaint, though she saw Joseph sneak one particularly dense specimen to the ranch dog. In the afternoons, Preston taught her to ride on a gentle mare named Rosie. Naomi proved to be a nervous student, gripping the saddle horn with white knuckles while Preston walked alongside, his voice calm and encouraging. But gradually her confidence grew, and by the end of the 2nd week, she could walk and trot without fear of falling. You are doing well, Preston told her one evening as they unsaddled the horses together. Better than I did when I was learning. I fell off 5 times the first day. Naomi laughed, imagining a younger Preston tumbling into the dirt. Somehow I doubt that. You seem born to this. My mother might have different memories. She was the one who taught me, and I tried her patience something fierce. His expression softened with remembrance. She was a fine rider, grew up in Texas, could rope a steer as well as any man. She sounds remarkable. She was. Preston ran a brush over his horse's flank with long, even strokes. She passed when I was 16. Fever took her in winter. My father was never quite the same after. I am sorry, Naomi said quietly. She wanted to tell him about her own mother, who had died when Naomi was 12, leaving her and Clara to navigate their father's cold indifference. But sharing such stories required a honesty she could not afford. Preston looked up, catching her gaze. It is strange, is it not? We are 2 people preparing to marry, and we know so little about each other. Naomi's heart seized. Yes, strange. Tell me something true, he said, setting down the brush. Something real about who you are. The request hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Naomi's mind raced through all the things she could not say, the truths that would send him running. But there were other truths, smaller ones that might satisfy. I love poetry, she said finally. especially Walt Whitman. My mother gave me a book of his poems before she died, and I have read it so many times the spine is broken. When I was sad or lonely, I would read his words and feel less alone. Preston's face gentled. I am not much for poetry myself, but I like that. The idea that words can do that can make you feel connected to something larger. He paused. May I tell you something true, please? I was glad when I got your letter, he said, his voice low. I had almost given up on the idea of finding someone. Out here, there are not many single women, and those that are have their pick of men. I am not much to look at, and I am not clever with words. But I have this land and I work hard, and I thought maybe that would be enough for someone. When you wrote about wanting adventure and a fresh start, I understood that. Sometimes a person needs to leave the past behind. The irony of his words cut deep. If only he knew how desperately she needed to leave her past behind, how the shame of it followed her like a shadow. Naomi swallowed hard. You are more than you think, Preston. Any woman would be fortunate to have you. He ducked his head, embarrassed. Well, I hope you will come to think so. That night, Naomi lay in bed and faced the truth she had been avoiding. She was falling for Preston Sawyer. Not the desperate, heedless infatuation she had felt for Marcus, but something quieter and deeper. She admired his steadiness, his kindness, the way he treated his hired men with respect and spoke to his horses with affection. She liked how he listened when she talked, really listened, as though her opinions mattered. She liked the lines around his eyes when he smiled, the strength in his hands, the way he smelled of leather and sun and honest work. And it terrified her, because she was still lying to him, and lies could only sustain themselves for so long. The breaking point came 3 weeks after her arrival, on a Saturday when they went into Durango for supplies. Preston drove the wagon with Naomi beside him, pointing out landmarks along the way, telling her stories about the area's history. The town was busier than when she had arrived, miners and ranchers crowding the streets, women with parasols strolling past shop windows. They stopped first at the general store, where Preston introduced her to the proprietor, a plump woman named Mrs. Hadley who looked Naomi up and down with shrewd, assessing eyes. So you are the mail-order bride. We heard Preston had sent for someone. You are a brave girl, coming all this way. Thank you, Naomi murmured. Uncomfortable with the attention, Mrs. Hadley leaned closer, dropping her voice. A word of advice, dear. Men out here appreciate a woman who can pull her weight. No room for delicate sensibilities on a ranch. I understand. Naomi felt Preston's hand rest lightly on her back, protective. She is doing just fine, Mrs. Hadley, he said firmly. Now, we need flour and sugar, and some of that good coffee you keep in back. They moved through the store gathering supplies, and Naomi was selecting fabric for a new dress when she heard a woman's voice behind her, cultured and familiar. My goodness, is that Naomi Rosewood? Ice flooded Naomi's veins. She turned slowly, dreading what she would see. Cynthia Harrington stood 3 feet away, eyes wide with surprise beneath an elaborate feathered hat. Cynthia, who had been on the Philadelphia school board. Cynthia, who had presided over Naomi's dismissal with barely concealed satisfaction. Mrs. Harrington, Naomi managed, her voice strangled. What a surprise. Indeed. My husband took a position with the mining company here, can you imagine? We arrived just last month. Cynthia's gaze sharpened, taking in Naomi's simple dress, the worn quality of her appearance. I had no idea you came west. How fortunate that you found employment. The emphasis on the last word carried volumes of implication. Preston had moved to her side, and Naomi felt his curiosity like a physical thing. This is Preston Sawyer, Naomi heard herself say. My fiancé. Preston, "This is Mrs. Cynthia Harrington. We knew each other in Philadelphia, madam." Preston touched his hat brim, polite but reserved. He must have sensed something wrong in the tension crackling between the two women. "Fiancé," Cynthia repeated, her smile sharp as a knife. "How wonderful! And does Mr. Sawyer know about your time in Philadelphia, about the reason you left?" The world narrowed to the pounding of blood in Naomi's ears. This was it, the moment when everything would come crashing down. She could see Preston's confusion, see him starting to understand that something was terribly wrong. "Mrs. Harrington," Naomi said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "I would appreciate your discretion." "Discretion?" Cynthia laughed, a brittle sound. "My dear, if you wanted discretion, you should not have engaged in such scandalous behavior." A teacher, carrying on with an engaged man, caught in a compromising position. The whole city talked of nothing else for weeks. Preston went very still beside her. Naomi wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. "I see you neglected to mention that in your courtship," Cynthia continued, clearly enjoying herself. "Well, Mr. Sawyer, I suppose you deserve to know the truth about your bride-to-be. She was dismissed from the Henderson Academy for Girls for Moral Turpitude. Quite the scandal. I am surprised she dared show her face anywhere, let alone deceive some poor, unsuspecting rancher." "That is enough." Preston's voice cut through the store like a whip crack. Several heads turned their way. Cynthia blinked, taken aback by his tone. "I beg your pardon." "You have said quite enough, madam. I thank you for your concern, but my private business is my own." He took Naomi's elbow, his grip gentle but firm. "Come on, we are leaving." "But the supplies," Naomi whispered, mortified. "They can wait." Preston steered her toward the door, leaving their half-filled basket on the counter. Mrs. Hadley stood gaping, and Naomi knew by tomorrow everyone in Durango would know her shameful history. They walked to the wagon in silence. Preston helped her up, then climbed into the seat beside her and took up the reins. They were halfway out of town before he spoke. "Is it true?" Naomi closed her eyes. "Yes. You were dismissed from your position for carrying on with a man." "He told me he loved me," Naomi said, her voice breaking. "He said we would marry. I believed him. But he was engaged to someone else, someone wealthy, and when we were discovered, he denied everything. I lost my position, my home, my reputation. My own sister would not take me in. I had nowhere to go, no money, no prospects, so I lied to you. I lied because I was desperate, and I am so very sorry." Preston said nothing. The silence stretched on, punctuated only by the creak of the wagon and the clop of hooves. Naomi's eyes burned with unshed tears. She would not cry. She had done enough crying. "When we get home," Preston said finally, his voice carefully neutral, "you can pack your things. I will give you money for passage back east or wherever you want to go. I will not have it said that I left a woman stranded." The words hit like physical blows. Naomi nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Of course he was sending her away. She had lied to him, deceived him from the very beginning. Why would he want anything to do with her now? The 2-hour ride back to the ranch felt like an eternity. Preston did not look at her, did not speak. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the road. Naomi sat rigid beside him, dying by inches. This was worse than Philadelphia, worse than the whispers and the judgment, because she had dared to hope. She had let herself imagine a future here, a life with this good man, and now it was ashes. When they reached the house, Preston stopped the wagon and jumped down. But instead of helping Naomi dismount, he walked away, striding toward the barn with his shoulders tense. Naomi climbed down on her own, stumbling slightly, and made her way into the house on shaking legs. She went upstairs and pulled out her carpet bag, the same one she had arrived with. Her vision blurred as she folded the few dresses, The worn undergarments, the nightgown. Everything fit easily, a life compressed into a single small bag. She found the poetry book and pressed it to her chest, breathing hard. Where would she go? She had no family, no friends. Perhaps she could find work somewhere as a seamstress again or a maid. It did not matter. Nothing mattered. The light was fading when she heard boots on the stairs. Preston appeared in the doorway, filling it with his presence. His hat was gone, and his hair was disheveled as though he had been running his hands through it. "Why did you not tell me?" His voice was raw. "Before you came, or when you arrived, why did you not just tell me the truth?" Naomi set down the book with trembling hands. "Would you have accepted me if I had? If I had written in my letter that I was a ruined woman, dismissed in scandal, that I had been foolish enough to trust a man who lied to me? Would you have sent for me then?" "I do not know," Preston said honestly. "Maybe not, but you did not give me the choice." "No, I did not. Because I was desperate and afraid, and I thought if I could just get here, if I could just show you that I was capable and willing to work, that maybe the past would not matter." Tears spilled over, running hot down her cheeks. "I know it was wrong. I know I should have been honest. But I had nothing, Preston. No home, no money, no hope. You were my last chance, and I took it, and I am sorry. I am so terribly sorry." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. Naomi gasped, shocked by the sudden embrace. Preston held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, and she could feel him shaking. "You should have told me," he said into her hair. "Not because it would have changed my mind, but because you should not have had to carry that alone." "I do not understand." Naomi pulled back enough to see his face. "You are not sending me away." "No." His eyes were fierce. "I am not sending you away, but I lied to you." "Yes, you did. And that hurts. I will not pretend otherwise, but Naomi, I understand why. You were backed into a corner by cruel circumstances and a man who took advantage of you. That does not make you ruined. It makes you human." "The whole town will know by tomorrow," Naomi said desperately. "Mrs. Harrington will make sure of it. They will talk, Preston, about both of us." "Let them talk." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "I do not give a damn what the gossips in Durango think. What matters is what I think, what you think. And I think you came here looking for a second chance, and I think you deserve one." "Why?" The word came out as a sob. "Why would you still want me after knowing the truth?" Preston's expression softened. "You want to know what I see when I look at you. I see a woman who makes terrible coffee but tries anyway, who fell off Rosie 6 times but got back on every time, who reads poetry at night by candlelight and whispers to the chickens when she thinks no one is listening. I see someone who was dealt a bad hand and played it the best she could. That is not shameful, Naomi. That is brave." "I am not brave," she whispered. "You traveled 1,000 miles alone to start over with a stranger. That is the definition of brave." He paused, searching her face. "When I wrote in my letter that sometimes a person needs to leave the past behind, I meant it. I do not care what happened in Philadelphia. That is over and done. What matters is what happens now here between us." Naomi's heart felt too large for her chest. "I do not deserve your kindness. That is not for you to decide." Preston's voice turned gentle. "Naomi, I have been thinking these past 3 weeks that I could fall in love with you. And maybe that is foolish, maybe I am moving too fast. But when that woman attacked you in the store, all I wanted to do was protect you. Stand between you and anyone who would hurt you. That means something." "I could fall in love with you too," Naomi admitted, the words tumbling out. "I think I already am. You are good and honest and everything Marcus was not. But I was so afraid, Preston, afraid that if you knew the truth, you would look at me the way everyone else did, like I was something dirty." "I am looking at you now," he said. What do you see?" Naomi studied his face, the blue-gray eyes that held no judgment, only warmth and something that might be the beginning of love. "I see someone I do not want to leave." "Then do not leave. Stay. Marry me for real, not out of desperation or convenience, but because we choose each other. I cannot promise it will be easy. People might talk and ranch life is hard, but I can promise I will never lie to you and I will never make you ashamed of who you are." "Yes," Naomi breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." Preston kissed her then, softly at first, then deeper as she responded. It was nothing like kissing Marcus had been, all performance and urgency. This was different, a promise sealed with gentleness, respect, and a growing passion that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should go see the Reverend tomorrow," Preston said, his voice husky. "If you are willing. I do not want to wait any more." "Neither do I." They were married the next afternoon in Durango's small church, with Miguel and Joseph standing as witnesses. Naomi wore her best dress, carefully mended and pressed, and Preston wore clean trousers and a shirt Naomi had never seen before. The Reverend, an elderly man with kind eyes, spoke about love and forgiveness, about the importance of honesty between husband and wife. If he had heard the gossip already circulating through town, he gave no sign. Naomi saw Mrs. Harrington and several other townswomen in the back of the church, their faces avid with curiosity. But when she looked at Preston, standing tall beside her, repeating his vows in a clear, steady voice, none of that mattered. He was choosing her, scandal and all. He was saying with every word that she was worth standing beside. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Preston kissed her in front of everyone, thorough and unhurried, and someone in the congregation gasped. Naomi did not care. Let them talk. She was Preston Sawyer's wife now, and that meant she had a home. They celebrated with dinner at the town's small restaurant, all four of them. Miguel and Joseph regaling Naomi with stories about Preston's early days at the ranch, the disasters and triumphs. Preston protested the more embarrassing tales, but his eyes crinkled with laughter. Naomi felt lighter than she had in months, almost giddy with relief and happiness. On the ride home, she leaned against Preston's shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her. The setting sun painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, and Naomi thought she had never seen anything so beautiful. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me. The real me, not the scandal or the mistakes. Just me." Preston pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for staying, for trusting me enough to build something real." That night, they came together as husband and wife in the big bed with the colorful quilt, and it was tender and awkward and perfect. Preston was patient with her nervousness, his hands gentle as he learned what made her gasp and sigh. When it was over, Naomi lay in his arms and felt truly safe for the first time since her mother had died. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Preston replied, and she knew he meant it. The gossip in Durango did not die quickly. For weeks, Naomi felt eyes on her whenever they went to town, heard whispers cut short when she approached. Mrs. Harrington made a point of snubbing her publicly, turning away when Naomi tried to greet her at church. Other women followed suit, their moral superiority wrapped around them like armor, but there were surprises too. Mrs. Hadley at the general store proved to be an ally, greeting Naomi warmly and making a point of asking after her health and happiness. "Any fool can see Preston adores you," she declared loudly enough for the other customers to hear. "And that is all that matters." The Reverend's wife, a plump woman named Dorothy, invited Naomi to join the church sewing circle. When several members protested, Dorothy fixed them with a stern look. The Lord teaches forgiveness and compassion. Any woman who cannot extend both should perhaps examine her own soul more closely. The matter was settled, and Naomi found herself welcomed, if not warmly, at least civilly. At home, life developed its own rhythm. Naomi learned to cook properly, guided by Miguel, who turned out to have a talent for making flour and basic ingredients into meals that satisfied hungry ranch hands. She learned to churn butter, to preserve vegetables for winter, to do the endless laundry that ranch life required. Her hands, once soft and suited only for turning pages, grew calloused and strong. Preston taught her more about riding, and she progressed from nervous beginner to confident horsewoman. On Sunday afternoons, they would ride into the mountains together, following trails that led to hidden meadows carpeted with wildflowers. Preston would spread a blanket and they would have picnics, talking for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood, about his mother's stories of Texas, about his dreams for the ranch. She told him about her mother, about growing up with a father who could not be bothered to notice his daughters, about the books she had loved and the poems she had memorized. "Recite one for me," Preston asked one afternoon, his head pillowed on her lap as she ran her fingers through his hair. Naomi thought for a moment, then began softly. "I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you." Preston closed his eyes, listening. "That is beautiful. What does it mean?" "It means we are all connected," Naomi said. "That every person has worth and dignity, that we all share in the same fundamental humanity." Whitman believed in the goodness of ordinary life, the beauty in simple things. "I like that," Preston murmured. "The beauty in simple things. That is what we have here, is it not? Nothing fancy but good." "It is more than good," Naomi said fiercely. "It is everything." As autumn approached, the ranch work intensified. Preston and the hired men prepared for the cattle drive, culling the herd and selecting the animals to sell in Denver. It would mean Preston would be gone for 2 weeks, and Naomi dreaded his departure even as she understood its necessity. "I wish I could come with you," she said the night before he left, curled against his side in their bed. "Next year, maybe," Preston said. "But this year I need you here, keeping things running. Miguel and Joseph will handle the daily work, but you are the heart of this place now. I trust you to watch over it." The responsibility warmed her even as the thought of his absence made her anxious. "I will take good care of things. You just come back safe, always." He kissed her deeply. "I love you, Naomi Sawyer." "I love you too." Preston and Joseph departed at dawn, driving 50 head of cattle toward Denver. Miguel stayed behind to manage the ranch, and Naomi threw herself into work to distract from Preston's absence. She cleaned every corner of the house, organized the pantry, mended every piece of clothing that needed it. In the evenings, she sat on the porch with Miguel, and he taught her Spanish words while she taught him to read better in English. "You are good for Preston," Miguel told her one night. "I have worked for him 4 years now, and I have never seen him so happy. He needed someone to share the load, to give him a reason beyond just work." "He saved me," Naomi said quietly. "I was drowning and he threw me a rope. You saved each other, I think." Miguel's weathered face creased in a smile. "That is how the best marriages work." On the 10th day of Preston's absence, Naomi woke feeling strange. Her stomach churned, and she barely made it outside before being violently sick. She assumed it was something she had eaten, but when it happened again the next morning and the morning after that, realization dawned. She was pregnant. Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, hand pressed to her still flat stomach, overwhelmed by a tangle of emotions. Joy because she wanted Preston's child. Fear because childbirth was dangerous and doctors were far away. Wonder because there was a life growing inside her, a product of their love. When Preston returned a week later, trail-worn and weary but grinning at the successful sale, Naomi met him on the porch. He swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, and she laughed and held him tight. "I have news," she said when he finally set her down. "Good news, I hope. I have been dreaming of your cooking for 2 weeks. Better than that." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Preston's eyes went wide. He opened his mouth, closed it, then laughed, a sound of pure joy. "A baby. We are having a baby." "Yes." "I think it happened early on, maybe even our wedding night." He kissed her then, tenderly, reverently. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I am sure." Preston whooped and spun her around again, and Miguel and Joseph came running from the barn to see what the commotion was about. When Preston told them, Miguel embraced them both while Joseph stood grinning like a fool. "We will need to build a cradle," Preston said, already planning. "And maybe expand the house, add another bedroom." "Preston, we have months yet." But Naomi was smiling, infected by his enthusiasm. "I want everything ready. I want our child to have everything." He cupped her face. "You have given me so much, Naomi, more than I ever dreamed possible." The pregnancy progressed through winter. Preston was absurdly protective, insisting Naomi rest more, take on lighter chores. She protested but secretly loved his attention. The way he would rest his hand on her growing belly and talk to the baby about the ranch, the horses, the mountains they would explore together. In town, Naomi's pregnancy changed some attitudes. Motherhood was respectable, a sign of proper womanhood, and several women who had snubbed her began to soften. Dorothy invited her to a quilting bee where the women were making blankets for babies in the community, and Naomi found herself cautiously accepted. Even Mrs. Harrington unbent slightly, offering perfunctory congratulations when they crossed paths. But Naomi no longer cared as much about their opinions. She had Preston, the ranch, a life she was building with her own hands. The past was fading, becoming something that had happened to a different person. She was Naomi Sawyer now, rancher's wife, mother-to-be. The shame that had followed her from Philadelphia lost its power in the face of her present happiness. The baby came on a warm May morning in 1883, after 12 hours of labor attended by Dorothy, and the town Dr. Preston had insisted on bringing to the ranch. Naomi thought she might die from the pain, gripping Preston's hand so hard she left bruises. But when the doctor placed the squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, all the agony faded to nothing. "A boy," the doctor announced, "strong and healthy." Preston sat beside Naomi on the bed, tears streaming down his face as he touched their son's tiny hand. "He is perfect. You are perfect." They named him Thomas, after Preston's father. Tommy had his father's blue-gray eyes and a shock of dark hair, and from the moment he entered the world he made his presence known with lusty cries and strong lungs. Naomi had never been so exhausted or so happy. The ranch hands took turns peeking in to see the baby, Miguel bringing a hand-carved wooden horse he had made, Joseph presenting a pair of tiny boots he had somehow procured in town. The house filled with flowers and casseroles from neighbors, and even Mrs. Harrington sent a card of congratulations, though she did not visit. Those early months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, but Preston was a devoted father, walking the floor with Tommy when he fussed, changing nappies without complaint. Naomi would watch him, this big, capable rancher reduced to mush by a tiny baby, and fall in love with him all over again. "You are a natural at this," she told him one night as he rocked Tommy to sleep. "I am terrified I will break him," Preston admitted. "He is so small." "You will not break him. "You are doing wonderfully." Naomi joined them, leaning against Preston's shoulder. "We are doing this together." As Tommy grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Preston's careful management and good instincts paid off, allowing them to expand the herd and improve the property. They added 2 more bedrooms to the house, anticipating future children, and built a proper schoolhouse on the edge of the property when Naomi announced she wanted to teach again. "But just children from the surrounding ranches," she said. "A few hours a day, the basics. So many of them have no access to education." Preston supported the idea enthusiastically, helping her outfit the small building with desks and a chalkboard. Within a month, 6 children from neighboring families were attending, their parents grateful for the opportunity. Naomi discovered that teaching was still her calling, and doing it on her own terms in a place where she was valued healed something in her that had been broken. 2 years after Tommy's birth, Naomi gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Rose. She was smaller than Tommy had been, with her mother's dark hair and a temperament as sunny as a summer day. Tommy, now a rambunctious toddler, was initially suspicious of this interloper, but quickly became fiercely protective of his baby sister. Life settled into a pattern of work and family, seasons marked by cattle drives and planting, by first words and first steps. Miguel retired after 7 years, moving to live with his daughter in Santa Fe, and they hired 2 new hands. Joseph married a girl from town and built a house on the southern edge of the property. The ranch became a small community, interconnected and mutually supportive. In town, Naomi had earned her place through consistency and grace. She taught children to read, helped with church functions, and treated everyone with kindness whether or not they had been kind to her, even Mrs. Harrington eventually conceded defeat, offering a stiff but genuine apology for her behavior years prior. "I was wrong to judge you so harshly," she said one Sunday after church. "You have proven yourself to be a woman of character." "Thank you," Naomi replied simply. She bore no grudge. The woman who had arrived in Durango 8 years ago, desperate and ashamed, felt like a stranger now. On a warm evening in June 1890, Naomi sat on the porch with Preston, watching Tommy chase Rose through the yard. At 8 years old, Tommy was his father's shadow, already confident on horseback and eager to learn everything about ranching. Rose, at 6, preferred books and flowers, spending hours in the garden Naomi had cultivated. "You ever think about Philadelphia?" Preston asked, his arm around Naomi's shoulders. "Sometimes," Naomi admitted, "but it feels like it happened to someone else, like I read it in a book." "Do you regret any of it? Even the hard parts that brought you here?" Naomi considered the question. "I regret hurting myself through foolish choices. I regret trusting someone who did not deserve it. But do I regret the path that led me to you to this life? Never." Preston kissed her temple. "Do you remember what I said when you arrived? That you brought everything I need?" "You said that after we were married, when I tried to apologize again for having so little." "Well, I meant it. You brought yourself, your courage, your capacity for love. That was everything." He pulled her closer. "And you still are." Their children's laughter rang across the yard, mingling with the evening calls of birds. The mountains stood eternal on the horizon, purple in the fading light. Somewhere in the barn, a horse whinnied. The land smelled of sage and grass and home. "We should have another," Preston said suddenly. Naomi laughed. "Another child? Are you serious? Why not? We have room and I love being a father. Besides, Rose needs someone closer to her age. Tommy is too busy trying to be a rancher to play dolls." "I am 32 years old, Preston." "And I am 35. We are hardly ancient." He grinned at her, that smile that still made her heart skip. "Come on, one more." Then we will have a nice even four. Naomi pretended to think about it, though her heart had already decided. All right, one more. Their third child, a boy they named Samuel, arrived the following spring. He was a surprise in every way, arriving 3 weeks early and coming into the world so quickly Preston barely had time to fetch the doctor. Sam was quieter than his siblings, thoughtful and observant, content to sit and watch the world rather than charge into it. The years flowed on, marked by growth and change. Tommy grew into a capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. At 18, he was already taking on significant responsibilities, managing sections of the herd and proving himself a natural leader. Rose, at 16, announced her intention to become a teacher like her mother and began helping in the schoolhouse. Sam, at 13, surprised everyone by showing a talent for drawing, filling sketchbooks with detailed renderings of horses and mountains and ranch life. Preston's hair had gone silver at the temples, and lines creased his face, but he was still strong and vital, up before dawn every morning, in the saddle more days than not. Naomi's own dark hair held threads of gray, and her hands bore the marks of years of hard work, but she had never felt more beautiful. This life had shaped her, made her into someone she was proud to be. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Preston took her back to the meadow where they had picnicked so many times. The wildflowers were in full bloom, a carpet of gold and purple and white. He spread a blanket, and they sat together in the warm sunshine, their fingers intertwined. 20 years, Naomi marveled. How did that happen so quickly? Time moves fast when you are happy, Preston said. Thank you for these years, Naomi, for choosing to stay, for building this life with me, for giving me 3 incredible children and more joy than any man deserves. I should be thanking you, Naomi protested. You saved me, Preston. You gave me a home when I had none, dignity when I had lost it, love when I thought I would never deserve it again. We saved each other, Preston said, echoing Miguel's words from years ago. That is what love does. Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and sun and home. Do you remember what I said when I arrived? When you asked me what I brought with me, you said very little. And do you remember what you said after we married when I apologized for bringing nothing? I said you brought everything I need. Preston smiled, and I meant every word, then and now. They sat in comfortable silence, watching clouds drift across the endless Colorado sky. Somewhere below, their ranch sprawled across the valley, a testament to hard work and dedication. Their children would inherit it someday, carry it forward into the future. But for now, in this moment, it was enough to sit together and remember how far they had come. I love you, Naomi said softly. More than I knew it was possible to love someone. I love you too. Always have, always will. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the world in shades of amber and rose, Preston helped Naomi to her feet. They folded the blanket together, a task made smooth by 20 years of partnership, and began the ride home. The horses picked their way carefully down the mountain trail, and Naomi thought about the frightened woman who had arrived in Durango so long ago, carrying shame and secrets and a desperate hope for something better. That woman had found redemption not through forgetting the past, but through the grace of a good man who chose to see beyond it. She had found home not by running from who she had been, but by becoming someone new. The shame that had defined her for so long had been replaced by pride in what she had built, in the family she and Preston had created together. The ranch came into view as they crested the final rise, lights glowing warm in the twilight. Tommy was in the corral, training a young horse. Rose sat on the porch reading while Sam drew at the table nearby. The scene was so achingly familiar, so perfectly ordinary that Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "What is wrong?" Preston asked, concerned. "Nothing. Everything is right. That is why I am crying." He understood, as he always did, and squeezed her hand as they rode into the yard. Their children looked up, smiling, calling greetings. The ranch hands were heading to the bunkhouse for supper. A dog barked somewhere, and chickens scattered before the horses' hooves. It was all so beautifully, wonderfully normal. That night, after the children had gone to bed and the house had settled into quiet, Naomi sat at the kitchen table with the old poetry book her mother had given her. The spine was more broken than ever, the pages soft with handling. She opened it to her favorite passage and read aloud softly, though Preston was the only one listening. "I am larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness." Preston came to stand behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Is that Whitman?" "Yes. I used to read it when I felt small and ashamed and try to believe it was true, that I held goodness despite my mistakes. And now," Naomi closed the book and turned to look up at him. "Now I know it is true. You taught me that. This life taught me that." Preston pulled her to her feet and into his arms, holding her close. "You taught it to yourself. I just provided the space for you to do it." They stood like that for a long moment. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and true from broken pieces. Outside, the Colorado night wrapped around their home, vast and star-filled. Coyotes sang in the distance. The creek murmured over stones. The land breathed with life. Naomi thought of the stage rolling into Durango all those years ago, of the woman pressing her forehead to the window, wishing she could disappear. If she could speak to that woman now, she would tell her that shame does not have to be the end of the story. That love and grace can transform even the deepest wounds into scars that prove you survived. That sometimes the very thing you think disqualifies you from happiness becomes the foundation of your greatest joy. She would tell her that a cowboy with blue-gray eyes and gentle hands would be waiting at the Wells Fargo office. That he would see past the shame to the woman beneath. That he would offer her not just a home but a future, not just forgiveness but the chance to forgive herself. She would tell her that in 20 years, she would stand in a kitchen she helped build, in a house filled with love, surrounded by children who knew nothing of scandal and everything of security. That she would teach again, this time on her own terms. That she would earn respect through consistency and kindness. That she would learn to ride horses and preserve vegetables and read the sky for weather. That she would become someone she was proud to be. Most of all, she would tell her to have courage, to step off that stage despite the fear, to accept the hand of the man who offers it, to believe that she deserves a second chance because she does. They all do, but that woman was gone now, transformed by time and love into someone stronger. Naomi Sawyer, rancher's wife, mother, teacher, woman who had learned that shame could be survived and happiness earned. She had arrived with nothing but shame, and Preston had been right. She had brought everything he needed because she had brought herself, broken and afraid, willing to try again. And he had given her the same gift in return. The space to heal, the time to grow, the love to become whole. "Come to bed," Preston murmured against her hair. "Tomorrow comes early." "It always does," Naomi agreed, but she was smiling. They climbed the stairs together, pausing to check on each sleeping child. Tommy sprawled across his bed, already as tall as his father. Rose slept curled on her side, a book tucked under her pillow. Sam had fallen asleep with charcoal smudges on his fingers, his sketchbook open to a drawing of the ranch at sunset. In their own room, Naomi and Preston undressed in comfortable silence and slipped between sheets that smelled of sun and sage. Preston pulled her close, and she settled into the familiar curve of his body, her head on his chest where she could hear his heartbeat. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. All those years ago and every day since. For choosing me." "Always," Preston promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Always and forever." Naomi closed her eyes and let sleep take her, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, that she was home, that the shame she had carried like a stone had finally been set down. In its place was gratitude, joy, and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. The ranch slept around them, sheltered by mountains and sky. In the morning there would be work to do, children to feed, lessons to teach, cattle to tend. But for now, there was only peace and the quiet breathing of the man she loved beside her. Naomi Rosewood had boarded a stage in Philadelphia, carrying nothing but shame and a carpetbag of lies. Naomi Sawyer lay in her own bed in Colorado, surrounded by family and love and 20 years of honest living. The distance between those two women was measured not in miles but in grace, redemption, and the transformative power of a love freely given and gratefully received. She had come west to hide from her past. Instead, she had built a future. And that future was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined in those desperate days when shame seemed like all she would ever be. Preston's breathing deepened into sleep, and Naomi smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow she would wake beside him, as she had for 20 years, as she hoped to for 20 more. They would have breakfast with their children, work the land they loved, and continue building the life they had chosen together. It was not the life she had planned. It was infinitely better. And when the sun rose over the San Juan Mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and possibility, the Double S Ranch would wake to another day of honest work and simple joy. Naomi Sawyer would rise with it, grateful for every moment, every choice that had led her here, every chance she had been given to become not who she was, but who she was meant to be in the end. Preston had been right all along. She had brought everything he needed. And he had given her everything she did not know she deserved. Love, home, a second chance at happiness, herself reclaimed and made whole. That was more than enough. That was everything.